Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer. On the Newshour tonight, full coverage of the decision to take 2 diet drugs off the market. A look at what now in Bosnia with Senators Biden and Hutchison, and a report and a debate about bilingual education. It all follows our summary of the news this Monday.
Major fund.
Finally tonight, the debate over bilingual education. We begin with this report by Betty Ann Bowser.
Like millions of second graders, Antonio Peña is learning to read. His vocabulary is improving and his handwriting is growing steadier. But his education still isn't typical because he's doing it all in Spanish. Peña is one of a growing number of American students who learn basic skills in their native languages before adding English. It's called bilingual education. Peña's teacher, Claudia Beck, says it's important for him to learn the basics in Spanish.
Antonio, he knows a lot of English, he understands a lot of English, but still, he's still learning concepts in his language, in his native language, you know, concepts in science, you know, life cycles of animals, they're all concepts. And once we have that idea in our mind, then we can attach vocabulary to it.
Since 1974, all schools that accept federal funding must provide special language programs to students like Peña. But the number of students in these programs has grown so dramatically that many districts are strapped for bilingual teachers and techs. Across America, more than 2.8 million public school students do not speak fluent English. That number has soared 100% in the past decade. With the explosive growth has come disappointing statistics. Nationally, 40% of students who have difficulty speaking English never complete high school.
Did you get back from the schools?
Education professor Rowland Tharp says the problem has forced many districts to take a closer look at their bilingual programs.
It's happening everywhere, and it's being faced by school boards, sometimes at the state level, or it's being re-examined as to what kinds of programs should be prescribed or what should be the range of options. There's a great deal of it, of re-examination going on.
In Antonio Peña's school in Denver, there's a heated debate over the best way to teach bilingual children. This month, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights charged that Denver's school district violated federal law by providing an inadequate education for students with limited English skills. The federal reprimand came as Denver proposed to strengthen test scores with a new Get Tough program. 3 years and you're out of bilingual class. Irv Moskowitz, whose own parents had to learn English when they emigrated to the United States, is the superintendent of Denver schools.
What we're saying is that 3 years ought to be that serious time for check. Let's get a snapshot, profile of where is this kid at this point. I mean, this child or this young person's in there for 3 straight years. What has happened?
Denver officials say too many students have been isolated in bilingual classes.
Let's talk about a 16, 17-year-old, or one who's about to graduate. And this kid is had plenty of this bilingual program, never really been in trouble. You know, not been absent a lot, has some D's and some C's and some B's, but mostly C's. He's really young Mr. Average, and about to graduate from school. Really having a hard time with English. Can speak it, can read it, but really not on top of it. Where is this kid going? What's in store for this youngster?
In Denver, the dropout rate for Hispanics is 50%, far higher than any other ethnic group. Defenders of bilingual programs say any cutbacks will only encourage more Spanish-speaking students to quit. Hispanic activist Patricio Cordova is worried about the new plan.
30% of all Latino students are in the bilingual program. If you look at Latino students in general, if we are about half of the population, And if our graduation rate is less than 50%, then if you project that subset 10 or 20 years down the road, we have 1/4 of that segment of the population which does not have a high school education. And statistics show that for people 18 years and over with less than a high school education, the average yearly earnings are only about $6,000 or $500 per month. Moreover, 82% of all prisoners in this country are high school dropouts, et cetera, et cetera. So the implications are enormous.
In this district, the board and the administration has sabotaged bilingual education religiously.
In an emotional public hearing, bilingual supporters said the proposed time limits will turn kids into victims.
Si son limitados sus derechos como individuos bilingües,
if their rights as bilingual individuals are limited, they will end up adding them to the lines on the streets. Is this what you want? To see Hispanics as bad statistics?
That's what school board member Rita Montero used to think. An original supporter of bilingual education, Montero enrolled her own son in the program, but abruptly pulled him out after being disappointed in his second grade studies.
He was bringing home pieces of paper that he had written the number 1 across the sheet of paper, number 2 across the sheet of paper, and this child was adding 3-digit numbers. He was doing a little bit of fractions, a little bit of multiplication, and so to be writing a number 1 across the sheet of paper was just not doing it. So I said to the teacher, this is it. I want him to be taken out and put in an English-speaking class.
But many parents want their children to maintain Spanish so they can be proud of their cultural heritage. Montero says she, too, struggled with the issue.
I had to think, what is more important to me? To keep my child in a program where perhaps he'll learn some Spanish and it'll make me happy. Or do I want my child to be able to come out of public education with the ability to compete for scholarships, to be able to go to the college of his choice?
Academic success is exactly what bilingual educators say they strive for. Kathy Escamilla, who instructs bilingual teachers, says 3 years isn't enough time.
There's absolutely no evidence that a person can learn a second language in 3 years. We have, 500 studies that tell us that it takes from at least 5 to 7 years to become orally proficient in a second language, and by the 7th year, your reading and writing in a second language can approach that of a native English speaker.
Antonio Peña's mother, Maria, agrees. Maria Peña says her children have thrived in their bilingual classes, and their Spanish instruction allows her to help with their learning at home. And educators all agree that support at home is essential. Maria's daughter, Denise, has been in bilingual programs for 6 years. Peña says her daughter is ready to move on. But Antonio is just completing his 3rd year, and his mother says he's a long way from joining the English mainstream.
Antonio no está listo para moverse al inglés.
Antonio is not ready to move to English only because his foundation in Spanish is not yet good.
Superintendent Moskowitz is not convinced. He says there's more and more conflicting evidence of how long it takes to move into English-only classes.
You can go into research in bilingual education and find backing for almost any theory you'd like to espouse. And then it gets quoted as biblical. But meantime, right on the other side is someone who says something 180 degrees different in a different way.
Escamilla disagrees.
The research isn't controversial and it isn't inconclusive. There's very clear evidence that the kids who have a strong foundation in their native language, it takes 5 to 7 years to become proficient in English, and those are the kids who are likely to do well in school.
Denver officials say those who do not learn in 3 years will get individual attention. But some say the problem is not the length of time spent in bilingual. It's the fact that so many bilingual teachers aren't properly prepared.
When you have an inability to educate kids even in their own language because you have staff that's unqualified, how are we then going to educate kids and turn them out to be literate in 2 languages when we don't have enough qualified staff to do it?
In Denver, officials say they are beefing up the quality of the program by hiring more qualified teachers. But Professor Tharp says the overall record is spotty because states often ignore and underfund programs.
Everybody's trying to scurry off and do bilingual education without knowing how to do it or what it is or any agreement about what it's done. So everybody's doing something and everybody's saying we're doing bilingual education, and then go out and measure it, and to the big surprise, doesn't really seem to be doing very much better than not doing bilingual education. The school average looks to me better than it had.
His research center at the University of California, Santa Cruz is searching for the nation's most successful bilingual programs.
Okay.
Meanwhile, in Denver, officials hope they can enact their new plan when students return to school this fall.
More now into Margaret Warner. She recorded this discussion recently.